They say love is a fairy tale, a beautiful story you write together, page by page. Mine was a carefully crafted lie, a book full of empty promises and secrets hidden between the lines. I was supposed to marry Marcus. He was my everything, the man I was building my life with, the one I shared my deepest dreams and darkest fears with. We had it all planned out, the house, the future, a lifetime of happiness. Or so I thought. The day it all fell apart started like any other. Sunlight streamed through the window. I made coffee, and Marcus was supposedly at a business meeting. But a strange feeling, a cold knot in my stomach, wouldn't go away. I tried to call him, but the phone went straight to voicemail. Again and again, the unease grew into a full-blown storm inside me. I drove to his office, but his car wasn't there. Then, a thought I'd pushed away for months resurfaced, a nagging suspicion about his childhood friend, Martin. Martin, he was always there, a shadow in the corner of our picture-perfect life. Marcus always said they were just like brothers, but the way they looked at each other sometimes, it was a language I couldn't understand, but I could feel its weight. I drove to Martin's apartment, my heart pounding against my ribs like a drumbeat of doom. And there it was, Marcus's car parked right outside. My world didn't just crack, it shattered into a million irreparable pieces. The man I was going to spend my life with, in the arms of someone else. The betrayal was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. Every laugh we shared, every promise he made, every "I love you" he whispered, it all replayed in my mind, now tainted with deceit. It felt like I was drowning in a sea of my own naivety. For a moment, I just sat there, paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of the pain. I could have screamed, cried, hammered on the door, and demanded answers. I could have collapsed into a puddle of grief and let this heartbreak consume me. But as the initial shock wore off, something else took its place. A cold, hard resolve began to form in the wreckage of my heart. I wouldn't be a victim in this story. I wouldn't be the tear-stained footnote in their sordid affair. My hand was shaking as I picked up my phone, but my voice, when I spoke, was steady. I wasn't calling Marcus. I wasn't calling Martin. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I'd saved for a different kind of emergency, a name that held the key to everything: Dominic. Dominic, Marcus's uncle, is the patriarch of their family, a man whose influence is as vast as his fortune. He is the one who holds power over our family's future, the architect of the business merger our marriage was supposed to secure. He is a man who values legacy, reputation, and control above all else. He's also a man who despises weakness and disloyalty. He had personally approved of me, seeing our union as the perfect alliance. I knew calling him was a declaration of war, a move from which there would be no turning back. The phone rang once, twice, before his deep, commanding voice answered. "Hello?" I took a breath, the cold fury giving me a strength I didn't know I possessed. I told him everything. I spared no detail of the deception, the affair, the utter humiliation. I could almost hear the gears turning in his mind, calculating the fallout, the damage to the family name. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I knew what he was thinking. This wasn't just about a broken heart. It was about a broken contract. A multi-million-dollar deal was about to go up in smoke because of his nephew's recklessness. His carefully laid plans were unraveling. Finally, he spoke, his voice dangerously calm. "What do you want?" he asked. And that's when I played my hand. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about survival. This was about taking back control. I let a beat of silence hang in the air, letting the weight of my next words sow. "Marcus won't marry me," I said, my voice clear and unwavering. "The deal is off the table unless the marriage happens. Your reputation, your company's future, it all hangs on this union." I paused, letting the implication sink in. "So, you will marry me, Dominic," I repeated, my voice leaving no room for negotiation. "The wedding will proceed as planned. The contracts will be signed. The only thing that changes is the groom." The silence that followed was heavy, charged with shock and something else, maybe a flicker of respect. I had just made a demand that was as audacious as it was brilliant. I wasn't just walking away. I was rewriting the entire script. I was trading a lying fiancé for the king himself. They thought they could break me, discard me like a forgotten toy. They underestimated me. Marcus chose his past. Now, I'm choosing my future. This is no longer a story about a broken heart. It's a story about power, about vengeance, and about a queen taking her throne. And I will have my happily ever after, one way or another. This is just the beginning. 3 days before my wedding, a day that was supposed to be the happiest of my life, I was sitting in a dimly lit cafe, staring at a folder that felt heavier than a tombstone. Inside were pictures. Pictures of my fiancé, Marcus, the man I had given my heart to, wrapped in the arms of another man. And not just any man, Martin. His supposed best friend. My best man. The detective I hired didn't just find evidence of cheating, he uncovered their entire sickening plan. They were going to humiliate me at the altar. Marcus was planning to leave me standing there alone, running off with Martin while our families and friends watched my world crumble. My first reaction was a wave of cold, silent rage that nearly suffocated me. The love I felt for Marcus curdled into something bitter and vengeful. All those years, all those whispered promises, all the shared dreams, they were all a lie. A carefully constructed performance for an audience of one, me. He thought he was playing me for a fool, but he severely underestimated who he was dealing with. Crying wasn't an option. Breaking down would be giving them exactly what they wanted. No. I decided right then and there, the show must go on. But the script had just been drastically rewritten, and I was now the director. I went home and acted as if nothing was wrong. I smiled when Marcus called, discussing last-minute details about the floral arrangements. I listened as he told me how much he loved me, his voice smooth and practiced, a serpent's hiss disguised as a lover's whisper. Every word was a knife, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I let the pain fuel my resolve. He thought he was in control, that he held all the cards. He had no idea I was already building a new hand, a royal flush that would wipe that smug look right off his face. My plan started to form, elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its execution. They wanted a dramatic wedding? Oh. I would give them a wedding they would never, ever forget. I would make sure the humiliation they planned for me would be redirected, amplified, and served back to them on a silver platter. They thought they were the main characters in this tragedy, but they were about to be demoted to disgraced extras in my story of triumph. With my new groom secured, the rest of the plan fell into place like a perfectly orchestrated symphony of revenge. I called the wedding planner, the caterer, the venue. Under the guise of a surprise for Marcus, I made a few critical changes. The highlight video, for instance, the sappy montage of Marcus and me, was swapped out for a different kind of feature film, a collection of the detective's photos and video clips, set to a very ironic, very cheerful love song. I even made sure the seating chart was adjusted, placing Marcus and Martin's most conservative family members right at the front, with a perfect view of the main screen. Every detail was meticulously crafted to ensure maximum impact. I felt a cold, thrilling sense of power. They had intended to write me as the victim, the heartbroken groom left sobbing at the altar. They were wrong. I was rewriting my own story, and in this version, I was the one holding the pen. The wedding day was no longer a symbol of my impending heartbreak. It was the stage for my ultimate vindication. The wedding day arrived, a picture-perfect afternoon. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and I had never felt more alive. I stood at the altar, looking out at the sea of expectant faces. Marcus wasn't there yet, of course. He was probably with Martin, getting ready for their grand exit. The thought sent a shiver of delicious anticipation down my spine. Then, the music started. But it wasn't the traditional wedding march. It was the upbeat pop song I'd chosen for the video. The large screen behind the altar flickered to life. The first image was Marcus and Martin, locked in a passionate kiss. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The images kept coming. A rapid-fire montage of their secret meetings, their stolen moments, their betrayal laid bare for everyone to see. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the cheerful, mocking soundtrack. Just as the video ended, the doors to the venue swung open, and in walked Marcus, a look of pure horror on his face. He saw the screen, he saw the faces of our guests, and he saw me, standing at the altar, a calm, satisfied smile on my face. Before he could say a word, I took the microphone. It seems my original groom has been detained, but as I said, the show must go on. And as if on cue, the doors opened again, and walked Dominic, looking impossibly handsome in his suit, a confident smile playing on his lips. He walked right up to me, took my hand, and winked. I turned back to the stunned crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, my voice ringing with triumph, "I'd like to introduce you to my husband." "That's right, Dominic. Marcus's uncle, who is now my groom." Dominic turned to Marcus, a cold smile playing on his lips. "Let me introduce you," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the grand hall. "Damien is my husband now. So, from this moment on, you should call him Uncle." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Dominic's smile widened, a picture of pure satisfaction. "Now," he announced, turning back to the officiant, his hand tightening around mine, "let's continue with the wedding." The ceremony resumed, but the atmosphere had irrevocably shifted. The vows we exchanged were no longer just promises of love. They were a declaration of my victory, a seal on Marcus's spectacular downfall. My heart, once shattered by his betrayal, now beat with a triumphant rhythm. I looked at Dominic, my new husband, and saw not just a partner, but an ally, the instrument of my perfectly orchestrated revenge. Later, at the wedding banquet, The entire hall was a symphony of whispers and pointed stares, all directed at one table. Marcus and Martin sat there, isolated in a sea of judgment. The air was thick with mockery, a delicious chorus of disdain that I savored with every sip of my champagne. I could hear snippets of conversation floating from the surrounding tables. "Can you believe the nerve?" one guest would murmur. "To bring his lover to his ex-fiance's wedding, and to his own uncle's wedding, no less." Another would add, "Utterly shameless. I always knew there was something off about him." The words disgraceful, how could he? And no ounce of decency were passed around like canapes. Martin, the boy toy Marcus have thrown our love away for, looked pale and uncomfortable, fidgeting under the weight of 100 condemning eyes. He kept glancing at Marcus, as if seeking reassurance. But Marcus was too busy drowning his humiliation in whiskey, his face a mask of rage and disbelief. He had thought he could walk all over me, discard me like trash, and face no consequences. He thought he could humiliate me in front of everyone. But now, the tables had turned so completely, so beautifully. Every sneer, every judgmental glance aimed at him was a balm to my wounded soul. I leaned closer to Dominic, my husband, and whispered, "Are you enjoying the show?" He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that sent a pleasant shiver down my spine. "It's even better than I imagined," he replied, his eyes twinkling as he surveyed the room. "They're getting exactly what they deserve." He then raised his glass, clinking it gently against mine. "To us, Damien. To new beginnings." I smiled, a genuine, happy smile for the first time in what felt like an eternity. "To us," I echoed. The clinking of our glasses seemed to cut through the din of gossip, a clear, bright sound of finality. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a coronation. My coronation. I had risen from the ashes of betrayal, stronger and more powerful than ever before. As I looked across the room at Marcus's crumbling world, I knew this was just the beginning. The revenge had been sweet, but living well, thriving by Dominic's side, would be even sweeter. And I was going to enjoy every single moment of it. My revenge didn't stop at just exposing his affair. Oh no, that was just the appetizer. For the main course, I was going to dismantle Marcus's life, piece by painful piece, until he was left with nothing but regret. He thought he could break my heart and get away with it. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. The real game had just begun. A month after my wedding to Dominic, life felt different. It was a union of convenience, sure, but there was a surprising comfort in it. Dominic was a steady presence, a quiet ally in my storm. He knew about my past with Marcus, and while he never pried, his silent support gave me the strength to focus on my next move. And that next move was called Project Starlight. It was Marcus's baby, his magnum opus, the project he'd been pouring all his energy into for the past year. It was also his biggest vulnerability. The entire success of the project hinged on a crucial partnership with a tech firm called Innovate Corp, a deal he was set to finalize. If that deal fell through, the project would crumble, and so would the shareholders' faith in him. My plan was simple. I was going to make sure that deal never happened. The first step was information. I needed to know everything about Project Starlight and the Innovate Corp deal. Thankfully, my new position within Dominic's family company gave me access to resources I never had before. I spent days buried in market analysis, financial reports, and industry gossip. I learned the names of the key players at Innovate Corp, their motivations, their weaknesses. I discovered that the head of their development team, a man named Mr. Henderson, was notoriously risk-averse. He was brilliant, but he hated uncertainty. That was my opening. My next step was to create that uncertainty. I started by anonymously leaking carefully selected, slightly distorted data about Project Starlight's market viability to a few influential industry blogs. The data wasn't false, just presented in the worst possible light. I highlighted potential risks, magnified projected costs, and downplayed the potential returns. It was a subtle campaign of doubt. I made it look like Marcus was over-promising and under-delivering, that Project Starlight was a house of cards built on overly optimistic projections. The whispers started online, then moved to financial news outlets. Is Project Starlight the next big thing, or the next big bust? One headline read. The seed of doubt was planted. Meanwhile, Dominic was playing his part perfectly. At a high-profile industry gala, he accidentally let slip to a well-known tech journalist that his company was exploring a new venture with technology far superior to what Project Starlight was offering. He was vague, of course, just hinting at a groundbreaking innovation that would make Marcus's project obsolete before it even launched. It was a complete bluff, a phantom project we'd cooked up over dinner one night, but it worked like a charm. The news spread like wildfire. Suddenly, Innovate Corp had another, more attractive option to consider. Their confidence in Marcus began to waver. The final piece of the puzzle was a direct approach. I managed to arrange an accidental encounter with Mr. Henderson at a coffee shop near his office. I introduced myself as a market analyst with an interest in emerging tech. We started chatting, and I casually brought up the recent buzz around Project Starlight. I didn't badmouth Marcus directly. Instead, I posed questions. It's an ambitious project, isn't it? The resource allocation seems bold. I've seen some projections that suggest a significant market correction in that sector within the next 2 quarters. Have you factored that into your risk assessment? I presented myself as a concerned, objective third party, simply sharing industry insights. I could see the gears turning in his head. I had hit his biggest fear: risk. By the time we parted ways, I knew I had shaken his confidence to its core. The day of the shareholder meeting arrived. I wasn't there in person, of course, but I had a source feeding me live updates. The atmosphere in the boardroom was apparently ice-cold. Marcus began his presentation, his voice initially confident, but as he spoke, the questions from the board became sharper, more pointed. They brought up the negative press, the whispers of a superior competing technology, the very market volatility I had planted in Mr. Henderson's mind. They had spoken to Innovate Corp, who had officially put the partnership on hold, citing the need for further risk analysis. The news hit the room like a physical blow. Marcus was cornered. He fumbled for answers, his usual smooth-talking facade crumbling under the pressure. And then the patriarch, his own grandfather, the man whose approval he craved more than anything, spoke. His voice, I was told, was quiet, but carried the weight of absolute authority. He didn't yell. He didn't shout. He just expressed his profound disappointment. He questioned Marcus's judgment, his leadership, his inability to manage risk and secure a vital partnership. He said he was putting the project on indefinite hold and reevaluating Marcus's position as heir apparent. Every word was a dagger. For Marcus, this was worse than any financial loss. It was a public humiliation delivered by the one person he desperately wanted to impress. Later that evening, Dominic came home and found me on the balcony, staring out at the city lights. He handed me a glass of wine and simply said, "It's done. He lost." I took a sip, the cool liquid a stark contrast to the fire of satisfaction burning within me. I could picture Marcus, alone in his office, the echoes of his grandfather's words ringing in his ears. The man who had shattered my world was now watching his own crumble around him. But this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning of his downfall. He had taken everything from me, and I was going to make sure he paid for it, one regret at a time. The game was far from over. Next, I focused on my real masterpiece of revenge. Marcus wasn't just a cheater, he was a criminal. He thought his position in his family's company made him untouchable. He was wrong. I spent weeks, day and night, digging into the company's financials. It wasn't easy. I had to bribe a disgruntled junior accountant and learn more about financial loopholes than I ever wanted to know. But every late night, every risk I took, was fueled by the memory of his betrayal. Finally, I found it, a complex web of embezzlement and blatant tax evasion. He had been siphoning money for years, creating fake invoices and shell companies. It was a tangled mess, but I meticulously organized every single piece of evidence. Digital trails, forged signatures, bank statements that didn't add up. I had it all. The dossier was thick, damning, and beautiful in its destructive potential. With the evidence compiled into an undeniable case, I made an anonymous tip to the Financial Crimes Bureau. I didn't just send in a mail. I delivered a package with neatly labeled folders, a summary of his methods, and a flash drive containing all the digital proof. I wanted to make their job as easy as possible. Then, I orchestrated the final blow. I leaked a carefully selected portion of the evidence to a prominent financial journalist I knew. The story broke online just as the investigators were arriving at Marcus's office. Simultaneously, I sent a summary of the situation to key shareholders and the patriarch of his family, his own father. I wanted him to lose everything, not just his freedom, his reputation, his family's trust, his position in the company he was so proud of. I wanted it all to crumble. The news of his embezzlement and the impending investigation spread like wildfire. The company's stock plummeted. The shareholders were in an uproar, and his family, mortified and furious, immediately moved to oust him. His foothold, once so firm, vanished in a single morning. His days of freedom were officially numbered. The day the police came for Marcus was a day I'll never forget. I was sitting in a cafe across the street from his gleaming office building, sipping a latte. I watched as two detectives in sharp suits walked in. A few minutes later, they walked out with Marcus between them, his face pale and shocked. He was trying to maintain his composure, but I could see the panic in his eyes. He looked small, pathetic. The man who had once held my world in his hands was now being led away in disgrace. The satisfying click of the handcuffs was a sound I had dreamed of. The scene was even better than I had imagined. Paparazzi, alerted by the journalist, swarmed him, flashes popping, their questions like tiny daggers. "Murdoch Collins, is it true you embezzled millions? What does your family have to say?" He didn't answer. He just stared ahead, defeated. The empire he built on lies was collapsing, and I was the architect of its destruction. The legal battle was long and arduous, but I followed every moment. The evidence was overwhelming. My meticulous preparation had left no room for doubt. His high-priced lawyers tried every trick in the book, trying to shift blame, to discredit the evidence, but it was useless. The paper trail was undeniable. The day of the verdict finally arrived. I wasn't in the courtroom. I didn't need to be. I was at home, tracking the news online. When the headline flashed across my screen, I felt a profound sense of release. Marcus Collins sentenced to 8 years in prison. 8 years. It was a solid, satisfying number. He was found guilty on all major counts: embezzlement, fraud, tax evasion. His family had publicly disowned him. The company had erased his name, and the man I once loved was now a convicted felon. My revenge was complete. I closed my laptop, walked over to the window, and took a deep breath. The city looked different, brighter. The weight I had been carrying for so long was finally gone. It was time for my next chapter, a chapter without him. This wasn't just an ending. It was a new beginning. Now, it was Martin's turn. My revenge wasn't going to be a quiet whisper. It was going to be a deafening roar that would echo through every corner of high society. I had the ammunition, and it was time to fire. His scandalous pictures. And it wasn't just with one man. No, Martin had been busy. There were more than a dozen men, each photo more compromising than the last. These weren't just blurry snapshots. They were high-definition proof of his secret life, a life he had so carefully hidden behind a mask of propriety and judgment. He had destroyed my world with a single lie, so I would dismantle his with the undeniable truth. I didn't just send them to one person. I orchestrated a digital storm. I sent every single picture to the most voracious high society magazines, the ones that thrive on scandal. I leaked them to the biggest gossip bloggers on Weibo. I made sure they were everywhere, unavoidable. And the internet did what it does best. The pictures exploded. They weren't just a trending topic. They were the top search for an entire month. Martin Lee's secret life became the headline on everyone's lips, the notification on everyone's phone. His name was permanently linked to the very scandal he tried to pin on me. The public was relentless, dissecting every photo, every detail. He had wanted the world to see me as a monster, but now, they saw him for who he truly was. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for the Lee family. Their pristine reputation, built over generations, crumbled in a matter of days. They couldn't contain the scandal. It was too big, too public. In a desperate act of self-preservation, they did the unthinkable. They made a public statement, a cold, corporate-style announcement declaring that Martin was no longer a Lee. They officially kicked him out of the family, striking his name from the family tree as if he had never existed. They cut all ties, disowning him the moment the pictures went viral. Their decision wasn't just about family honor. It was about survival. Their company's stock plummeted, teetering on the verge of bankruptcy as investors and partners pulled out. The empire they cherished was collapsing, and they sacrificed their own son to try and save it. About a month passed. The noise had died down, and life had started to find a new, albeit different, normal for me. Curiosity got the better of me one evening. I heard whispers about where he had ended up, and I had to see it for myself. I found him working at a small, greasy diner on the outskirts of the city. The man I saw was a ghost of the one I once knew. The designer suits were replaced with a stained, ill-fitting uniform. His hair was unkempt, his face etched with lines of exhaustion and despair. He looked 10 years older, the light in his eyes completely extinguished. He was just a tired man, serving greasy food to strangers, a world away from the luxury and power he once wielded so arrogantly. He didn't see me watching from the shadows. I just stood there for a moment, a silent observer to his downfall. There was no joy, no triumph, just a hollow emptiness. Was this the victory I wanted? Seeing him so broken, so defeated. It didn't fix what he did to me. It just created another tragedy. I turned and walked away, leaving him to his new life, and me to figure out how to build mine from the rubble. The revenge was complete, but the healing had just begun. The first time I laid eyes on Damien, I thought he was the most beautiful man I had ever seen. Just being near him made my world feel brighter, happier. I didn't quite understand the feelings he stirred in me, but I knew they were real. We were a month away from our wedding, a month away from forever, and everything was perfect. Then Martin came back. My childhood friend, my first love, returned from abroad, and just like that, my heart started to race for him again. Or at least, I thought it did. I convinced myself I still loved Martin, that this was my second chance. I wanted to show him that I could move on, that I didn't need him. And a selfish part of me wanted to make Damien jealous, to see that fire in his eyes, to make him love me even more fiercely. It was a foolish, dangerous game. I started seeing Martin behind Damien's back. It was a whirlwind of secret meetings and whispered words. I told myself it was what I wanted, that this was me taking control of my heart. But soon, everything started to crumble. The lies piled up, the guilt gnawed at me, and I couldn't control the chaos I had created. My grand, stupid plan was to make a scene on our wedding day. I imagined I would leave him at the altar, and Damien would break down. He would cry. He would beg me to come back, to choose him. He would realize just how much he couldn't live without me. That's what I thought would happen. How wrong I was. When I walked away, he didn't cry, he didn't beg. He just stood there, his beautiful face a mask of cold disappointment. And then he did something I never could have predicted. He married someone else, right then and there. And not just anyone. He married my uncle, my own, flesh and blood, who had been a silent witness to my betrayal. 10 years. It's been 10 years since that day. My life now is a world away from the one I threw away. I work in construction, long days under the hot sun, and even longer nights trying to make ends meet. My hands are rough and calloused, a constant reminder of the life I now lead. Every night, when I'm alone in my small, empty apartment, the same thoughts haunt me. What if I had chosen Damien? What if I had never cheated on him, never given in to that childish impulse to play games with his heart? What would my life be like now? Would I be waking up next to him, his smile the first thing I see in the morning? Would we be running the company together, building a life, a family? But it's all pointless now. Regret is a bitter pill to swallow every single day, but it changes nothing. I can't turn back time. I can't undo the pain I caused, not to him, not to myself. I see his face sometimes, in newspapers or online. He's happy, successful, a pillar of the community alongside my uncle. They look good together. He looks at peace. And me? I'm just a ghost from his past, a story he probably tells as a cautionary tale. I made my choice that day, and now I have to live with it. I have to live with the knowledge that I had a masterpiece in my hands, and I tore it to shreds for a cheap imitation. The biggest regret of my life wasn't losing my fortune or my family name. It was losing Damien, and knowing, with absolute certainty, that I'll never get him back. This is my life now, a long, drawn-out punishment for a single, catastrophic mistake. And I have no one to blame but myself. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've been through something similar, remember that your story is not over. Please subscribe for more content.